I'm speaking to you today from Singapore, where I've been attending a major medical conference and has been sitting in lecture halls listening to presentations on cutting edge drugs, novel mechanisms, and elegant trial designs. I've had a growing sense of unease, not about the science, but about the system here surrounding the science. Singapore is, without question, a global biomedical research hub. The science is rigorous, the trials are well run, the collaborations are international, and on paper, this is a healthcare success story. But here's the uncomfortable observation. Much of what is discussed and even developed locally remains out of reach for the average Singaporean patient, for in theory, not in theory, but in practice. And this isn't only about experimental drugs still in development, but it's about drugs that are already approved, internationally recognized treatments, therapies that are routinely used and accessed by the general population in other first world countries. In Australia, for example, where I come from, once a treatment is recognized as effective, there is a clear national conversation about how to make it accessible, broadly accessible. It may not always be cheap, and subsidy can take time, but the clinical pathway is explicit. Doctors can prescribe, patients can obtain treatment, and the debate is transparent. In the United States, the system is fragmented and often criticized for cost, but access to new therapies is frequently faster. If a doctor decides that a treatment is appropriate, insurance, employer plans, or private payment often make that decision actionable, although it may not be that simple. Having said that, now compare that with Singapore. Here, innovations exist, but access is tightly gated and often silently. We speak a lot about translation into clinical practice. It sounds principled and patient centered, but in reality, transition is slowed by layers of cost effectiveness analysis, committee reviews, and risk adverse bureaucracy. Each step makes sense on its own, but together they create inertia. The result is a system where innovation is real, but selectively experienced. Let me give you one concrete example to make it less abstract. So let's say Monjaro. You can see the stand Monjaro behind me. It's a medication that is well known, now widely recognized internationally for diabetes and metabolic disease. This is no longer experimental science. It is already in routine clinical use in multiple countries. In Australia, Monjaro is not broadly subsidized yet, but access through private prescription is straightforward. The typical out-of-pocket cost is around 600 per month Australian dollars, which is roughly Singapore dollars 540. It's not cheap, but it is within reach for a significant portion of the population, and the clinical pathway is clear. In the United States, the retail out-of-pocket price is higher, often around 1,000 to 1,200 US dollars per month, which is roughly 1,350 to 1,620 Sing dollars without insurance. That's expensive, but many patients with private insurance or employer plans pay substantially less, and availability itself is rarely the limiting factor. Now look at Singapore. Here, public sector access is extremely limited, with no broad subsidy. In the private sector, typically pricing emerges and range about 600 to 1,500 Sing dollars per month, often around the mid-level of 800 Sing dollars, depending on dose and provider. For many regular Singaporeans, that's simply not a practical option. So we end up with an odd situation. The science is accepted, the drug is approved, the evidence is strong, yet access becomes class dependent. This is not about one drug. Monjaro is just a visible example of a broader pattern where internationally accepted treatments are readily available elsewhere but remain out of reach locally except for a small subset of patients. What troubles me most is not that Singapore is cost conscious. All healthcare system must be cost conscious. It's that the market affordability quietly replaces clinical relevance as the final gatekeeper without being openly as such. When that happens, the language of patient benefit remains lofty, while the lived experience of patients become increasingly constrained. Research institutions are incentivized to publish to attract grants. Pharmaceutical companies are incentivized to maximize global return. Regulations are incentivized to avoid error. Subsidy bodies are incentivized to control cost, but no part of the system is explicitly accountable for timely population level access. And so access defaults to market logic. Singapore excels at hosting innovation, it excels at validating science, it excels at global credibility. But healthcare is not ultimately about being a hub, it's about who actually benefits. Its innovation happens in a country, but it's not experienced by its people. Then something fundamentally is misaligned. This is not an argument against safety, it's not an argument against fiscal responsibility, and it's certainly not an argument against research excellence. It is an argument against for balance, for recognizing that a system can be world class on paper, yet quietly exclusionary in practice, and for asking honestly and publicly at what point does prudence become paralysis? At what point does excellence lose its meaning if access remains narrow? Singapore has the intelligence, the infrastructure, and the seriousness to confront this question. The challenge is whether innovation will continue to arrive here or whether it will also be allowed to serve here, to serve the people here. That, to me, is a real test of a mature healthcare system. Thank you.